evening. I'd like to call to order the May 8th Falmouth Planning Board meeting. The first thing on the agenda, we're going to table for a little while because our clerk isn't here. But we'll come back to it as soon as he is, or we'll table it for the rest until next week. That would bring public comment up. Does anyone here want to talk about anything that's not on our agenda? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. Next is approval not required. I did not see any A&Rs. Tom, no A&Rs tonight? Okay. Planning board, the next item, we're moving along quickly here. The next item on the agenda is discussion, decision
Hey, John.
for Everett and Cheryl Kist. And do we have a letter? Wasn't that the one?
Yeah, we have a letter. We withdraw our application without prejudice, 202 Quaker Road, for the law department, Dennis Senzali.
Motion to accept? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Next, applicant, Bad Martha's Farmers Brewery LLC, site plan review to construct. We've already had this read already, so this hearing's been ongoing. For the applicant, you have some new plans for us?
We do. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Kevin Clower. I'm an attorney with Ahmet Clower Law Firm here in Falmouth, and I represent Bad Martha Farmers Brewery LLC, the prospective buyer of this site and the applicant in this matter. As a brief refresher, we're looking to construct a new facility to be used for the brewing of beer, a tap room with light fare and sales for both on and off-site consumption. The site is 876 East Falmouth Highway, which is a 2.37 acre parcel located on Route 28 in East Falmouth. It's zoned mostly B2, with some small portion of it being agriculturally zoned. It's abutted to the west by town land, to the east by Mahoney's, to the north by an undeveloped subdivision, which is used as a part of the Mahoney's operation, and directly to the east is a paper road known as Audubon Circle. We have made changes to the plans based largely on this board's comments and concerns that were voiced at the last hearing. Foremost among those changes is we have reached an agreement for a combined curb cut with Mahoney's to be located on the Audubon Circle road layout. So what you'll see here is there will be one curb cut located here with an entrance to the site located on the eastern portion of our lot. This is the same turning radius as existed previously for emergency vehicles, so that should not present any sort of issue, as that was the exact same turning radius as was on the last plan, which they had approved. What this does here is it eliminates any potential issues with more than one curb cut located in the same area. In addition to that, in addition to the shared access, we've also reached an agreement with Mahoney's to share parking on a portion of their site that is zoned B2. This dashed line here represents the outer limit of the B2 zoning district on the Mahoney's lot. This increase in parking will allow us to have up to 94 seats potentially, though the intent is not necessarily to use those 94 seats based on the way they intend to use the outdoor patio with more of a communal seating with benches and just kind of an outdoor gathering spot, but that would allow for the necessary capacity. Other additions that were made were the addition of a 3-foot berm located on the southern side of the property, and this is specifically to address headlight glare potentially coming across the southern edge. We've also increased the landscaping in this area, added a substantial amount of landscaping space. That landscaping will be done in conjunction with and as an extension of the Mahoney's landscaping, which runs along the southern portion of their lot here. In order to address the concerns of Mr. Kogut from Oysters 2, there is a walkway being shown from the western portion of the lot, which will provide access from the western area without someone having to go around the entirety of the building, in the addition of a stairway here. And lastly, not quite lastly, there is a change to the design. The design is no longer to be corrugated metal, but instead to be wood siding. Potentially most importantly, I think, if for no one else than Mr. Dreyer, we have added a locus to the plans which were submitted this afternoon. Of course, they don't show up on This one.
They're on the hard copy.
They are on the hard copy. So those were submitted this afternoon. As we discussed, this proposal is a substantial improvement to the site. It is an allowed use in the business zone. We've had our initial zoning board of appeals hearing last week. It was received well, but they're waiting on the site plan review decision from the planning board before making their final determination. We've sought to address the concerns and questions of this board, and we believe we've done so in an appropriate manner, and I hope the board agrees with that and is willing to issue an approval. I, along with Mr. Permetti and Mr. Bunker, who's now joined us, would be glad to address any questions that you might have at this time.
So John, we're going to start with you.
Okay, thank you. Kevin, could you address the layout here of the Audubon Circle? How much of that is going to be paved? You have additional parking that you're going to be using from Mahoney's. I'm presuming that's a paved area?
That is a paved area. This area here is entirely paved currently.
Including the Audubon Circle?
Audubon Circle, there is a berm that runs across the front portion here. This area right here is not paved.
Okay.
The remainder of this whole area here is paved. It's essentially one large parking lot that runs from Oysters 2 all the way across to Mahoney's. We've discussed this with Mr. Bott, and what we would intend to do is would be creating a new island here. And I think that we have a line denoting the edge of pavement. This is the edge of the existing pavement. We would not be extending that past where it is, so we'd be creating a new curb cut here. This would not be built to road specifications because it's not a road at this point, it's still just a parking lot.
That part of Audubon Circle is paved right now?
Correct,
And will remain paved?
correct.
And you say you're going to create a berm, is it going to,
So this area here will now be a 3-foot berm rather than a stone wall.
but along Audubon Circle?
Mm-hmm.
I'll show you what I'm talking about, like right here.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to be a berm? Is that
It's,
a
yeah,
grass
small,
berm, or-
yeah, exactly, a small grass berm island, so to speak.
And are you going to have a walkway, designated walkway for those 14 or 15 spaces to walk across there?
So we're happy to put
Something
in,
delineated?
sure, I mean, there's no issue with putting in some striping here to denote a walkway. Would be happy to do that.
Okay. And lighting?
We did submit a lighting plan to show the areas of lighting.
Is there lighting for the
This is
14
all
or
to be
15
done.
spaces?
So, well, that's I mean, that will be lit largely from the Mahoney's building and from this existing building here. What we're trying to do is contain all lighting on the site, obviously. We don't want light pollution. This is all to be down lighting, but we're doing it in a way that doesn't create a shining beacon on
Okay.
Route 28.
Will there be any way, any indication for people to get to those 14 or 15 spaces as they pull into your parking
So
area?
I think what we would likely do is denote excess parking for, Bad Martha.
Okay.
But it's not to be necessarily exclusive. It does allow for shared parking on,
And I'm presuming you'll have a written agreement?
of course. Anytime we're going to use someone else's property, we're going to want that in writing.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Charlotte?
Yeah, I have a few questions. First, I didn't quite follow the lighting plan. You said it's going to be done in such a way that it will be downlighting. What way is that? Where is the lighting?
So these yellow circles denote the areas that would have, what we show here is a lamp or a light on each of these. Downlighting is just light that is cast downward as opposed to upward.
So they're light poles.
Small light poles. I mean, there'd be, I don't think we've settled on a type yet, but this is generally the lighting we would anticipate. Much of this, as you'll see here, is lighting that's going to be on the buildings with downward cast lights from the buildings.
But the parking lot will be lighted enough for people to be able to find their cars in safety.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I have a question about the materials on the roof and on the siding. It's going to be wood siding. That's very, thank you. That's really nice. But the color that your rendering has come through, I appreciate it being in color. That's really great. But I noticed that it's a really different color than Mahoney's 2, which has a matte finish stain, sort of dark brown look to it. And this has an overall kind of glowy orange look. What is the material on the roof?
The roof material, I believe, is asphalt shingles. Red cedar. Oh, red cedar. I misspoke.
Oh,
It's what?
red cedar.
roof. The building itself, do you have the photographs?
I
Because I submitted photographs of the existing building, because basically the siding, Peter Pimetti from Architectural Innovations. So we're, that's one of the reasons why I had done the photographs, because it makes this look kind of yellow, but it's basically a natural building, so there's
No, red cedar will
no
be
stain.
beautiful. And what, are you leaving the wood to weather on the
Yes.
siding?
Yes.
But not stain it to match Mahoney's too? So it'll be weathered wood and
Wait a
it'll be,
second. Oysters too or Mahoney's?
sorry, oysters too,
We were not matching it.
not, so near
Sorry.
but not quite. Right, very nice. The planting on the berm, it shows bush kind of spotted about. Could you discuss your landscape plan?
So the intent there is to, Mahoney's has a beautiful landscaping design on their property. Our intent is to work with Mahoney's to essentially create that as an extension of their landscaping. We've created a landscaping area. We're showing some trees, we're showing some bushes. We haven't had a full landscape design plan prepared by a landscape architect, because our intent is to work closely with Mahoney's. Much like the other location for Bad Martha is located next door to a similar home and garden center on the vineyard, and they cooperate with landscaping on the site there. So-
Terrific. It looks as if there's an intention to bring in a full-grown tree, or is that the renderer's thought?
That's the render.
That's the renderer.
It's a nice tree.
So it's an expensive tree.
Yes, it would be. Thank you.
Pam?
So your 3 plus or minus high planted earthen berm, that's going to be in lieu of having to put up an entire row of either fencing or trees?
That's
Because
correct.
it's going to be up 3 feet, and then the plantings
And then
will
there'll
be
be
there,
plantings on top of that.
which will definitely deflect. in terms
And that
of
was
the-
done, we had talked to Mr. Bott about that, and that was partly his suggestion and partly something my client had suggested, independent of Tom's suggestion. So given that, we thought it would be the most appropriate way to proceed.
That's a great idea. I think that's a stunning-looking building. I'm glad you got rid of the other thing. Also, on Oysters 2, it looks like there is now access from the back parking lot.
From the western portion of the parking, correct?
I'm sorry?
From the western portion of the parking.
Okay. That there will be a new concrete walk around and then another set of stairs going up
Correct,
toward where the front door is.
correct.
Sounds great.
Paul?
Appreciate your efforts to work with us on this. I think this can be a good addition to that area. I had 2 questions. One, Pam talked about how you get from the back. You're going to have signage directing people one side to the restaurant, one side to the brewery? Or is
Not-
this gonna
not
be
necess-
wherever you can park?
Not necessarily, because they will have shared parking, and it's not to say that one is exclusive of the other. I think there are some spots that might make more sense for one over the other. One thing we have talked to Mr. Bott about is delineating some of the western portion for employee parking, the further removed parking spots as the
Western
employee.
and northern?
Western was the intent, but perhaps,
Can you put that
would be
in,
amend.
please?
Yep. So we had discussed using some of the western portion over here delineated as employee parking. That would be the intent. We wouldn't necessarily want to restrict it to that, but that would be the intent here in this portion.
But the people in the north have to walk all the way around the building to get in then, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Bob, you got any?
Pretty much everyone has praised it. I add to that, I think it was a great collaboration. It just goes to show that when people are willing to work together, what can be done. Because we're going to have a nice-looking site there. It's going to be a benefit to that section of town. And I appreciate the effort that you and your clients have put into this. And the building's attractive. I really like the fact that you're gonna use that curb cut for Audubon Circle. That was kind of a suggestion that I had made, that we use that and then to take an immediate left. And so it's nice to see that you were able to make that work. I think it's a great solution.
Thank you.
I have absolutely no questions. I think you've done a fabulous job of answering our complaints and questions from last time, and I really like what I see.
Thank you.
Well, I'm pleased with everything, all the suggestions our group has made here, and I think we've, as working with you, I think we've actually added value here. I think this is a really nice site, and I think it's better, and I think things are working well. Any public comment? Please step up.
I actually live directly across the street, so I do like that you're going to build it up and then put planting above it, because I'm the one directly across from the parking lot, so I'm a little concerned about it. But the one thing I haven't been able to find online and reading the newspaper is the hours. How much is going to be outside? So at night, how much we're going to be impacted by the noise at night? If there's going to be music, all of those questions, because, you know, in the winter it's fine, but in the summer, I just have a lot of concerns about how much noise it's going to be.
You should give us your name for the record, please.
Okay, Deb Packard,
Okay, thank
and
you.
I live at 889 East Falmouth Highway.
And all comments come through the board.
Oh, sorry.
You're supposed to talk to us, and we have,
Sorry.
it's a rule, it's a rule. You're not supposed to question the applicant,
Okay.
That's our job.
I'm sorry. So my,
Okay,
my
I
question is directed then to you. If they've already discussed this, I haven't been able to find the answers to that. So mainly it's the hours. My number one question was if there was going to be outdoor seating, which I see that there is, which was a big concern, if it's going to be at night, and if there's going to be any entertainment or anything like that at night.
Okay, we'll take a seat, we'll let the applicant answer those questions.
So, easiest question first is the entertainment. We haven't really discussed it, and if the applicant were to do so, they'd need to apply to the Board of Selectmen for an entertainment license. It has not come up that is something they intend to do. As to the hours would likely be about 11 in the morning, and at night would be kind of on an as-needed basis. The liquor license would probably be set for midnight. That's what we intend to apply for. That being said, I think that's in line with most restaurants in town, and it is a business zone property, so I think it's an appropriate time and use for that property. And there is outdoor seating, which we've discussed, but you know, we're trying to address that with landscaping around it, and that is going to be largely communal, in the sense that, you know, they're not going to have tables and chairs necessarily, but the setup they have on the vineyard, for instance, they have some benches, they have some small patio furniture, they have, you know, a barrel that people might use to lean on and talk, but there's no intent for entertainment at this point.
So this would be subject to all the noise laws.
Just
of
like
the
anything
town,
else.
Same as any other place in town. So they have to go to the selectmen to get approval. They have to keep it at certain levels of noise. It's already dictated by the town bylaws and the noise levels they can make. Pam, you're jumping back in. I finished with our board, but you can go back. I'm sorry.
So I have sort of an interesting question. People are going to be able to come in and sit down and have a brew of some sort, or taste many of them.
Sure.
Do you have are you going to be working with Bob to talk about somebody having a few too many drinks and walking across to Oysters too?
Well, I think that, you know, we'll be going through the liquor licensing process for this site, just like any other site. And without getting too far afield, the servers will likely be tip certified, the on-site manager certainly will be tip certified. And like any other restaurant, they'll have an obligation to make sure that their patrons are behaving in a safe and appropriate manner.
I want to remind everybody, this is a site plan and design review. These issues come up at other boards. On other nights, they're really somebody else's job to deal with. We're particularly talking about the site plan and design. Crosswalk is a good idea for that. not just you, Pam, the public, I didn't want to go off on a use
I
discussion.
understand.
I just didn't want to go off on a use discussion, because that's not what we're here to do. Anybody else? Well, I'd like to thank you. It was a pleasure to see all the suggestions show up a week later on the plan. That was really cool.
Yeah.
Sometimes-
I hope the TV's
sometimes
picking
miracles
that
do
up as an
happen.
example.
And congratulations for working with Mahoney's.
Thank you. Well, we appreciate it. They're proving to be very good to-be neighbors at this point.
Great.
So I'm looking for, if everyone's been heard, I'm looking for a motion to close.
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And Tom, you'll work on a written approve for next meeting?
Yes, sir.
And can I just ask when the next meeting is? We're scheduled to go back for ZBA on the 17th. Thank you.
Or is this the 22nd?
May 22nd.
It is what it is. I can see if we can push that up.
You can report back. I mean, I
Yeah.
think we're
We'll
gonna be
talk.
favorable.
We'll talk with Sri and see how she wants to handle it.
We have no issues. If you could say no issues, that's fair.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Hopefully, they'll take my word for it.
Yeah. They can watch it. They can look it up if they want. Okay. Moving right along. Thank you, folks.
If I may, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
Just, I wanted to mention this earlier, all these plans are on the town's website, under the tab that says Planning Board Plans Under Review. So in the future, if someone's watching at home and they can't see what's on the screen, they can go to their computer, go to the Planning Board website, click on the tab that says Planning Board Plans Under Review by the Board, and find all these plans that you saw tonight.
So that should be the condition for every hearing we have. By the time we're having a hearing, the plans will be posted on our website.
That is the intent.
That is great.
Beautiful.
And Melinda did a great job with that, working with IT, getting the website set up, and, because we don't have right privileges for everything.
Right.
So working with IT, she got that set up, and the plans are on there, and all the ones we get in the future will be as well.
We probably should make mention of that, so people get used to that at the beginning of the hearing. that they
Right,
look it up.
that anyone at home, that will be available. Okay. So, planning board discussions, okay, committee reports. Davis Straits Multi-Family District in Charlotte, what do you got for us?
well, I think you've all gotten copies. I want to say where these things have come from, just so that people at home would know. There've been a few meetings, and one of the the subcommittee is held in order to get input into this draft. This is just a draft for discussion, the multifamily housing zone, very clearly labeled draft for discussion, the beginning of our conversation as a full board. But as a subcommittee of the board, we met with Sharon Rooney and Jessica?
Jessica
Mine,
Wineland or something.
we might not have her name right. Another person who came from the Cape Cod Commission to meet with us and talk over the intent of the things that they had said in the Davis Strait reset plan, because there are a lot of ideas in that about multifamily zoning. And we were taking notes on that, and from those notes and that discussion, and from the document, have prepared this draft. So it's just a start, but our thought, in addition to going, I hope tonight, Pat and Pam and I are hoping that we can go through this and get a sense of the board on each one of these items, if you're ready for that, and then talk about what our process might be for who else do we need to work with. We know that there are a lot of other committees and boards and people concerned with this before it ever gets into a final draft stage. So we want to talk about the substance and about the process, sort of in that order. And the second document is just a sort of a cheat sheet that I made up for myself, trying to learn the standards, for the different uses. So I had sort of made this up, going through our zoning book, And then Pat and I went through and added the multifamily line down at the bottom, just so that we'd be able to see, well, where might that fit in? How would it look compared to everything else? Does it fit in or doesn't it fit in? So these are just for our use in thinking through where we might want to go next with this.
Okay. One thing jumps out at me, and I know where you got it from, because some of the multifamily, the setbacks in the front, we have those big setbacks, but that's generally because they're worried about multifamily being put in next to residential neighborhoods. One of the things that we're trying to do, at least my understanding of it is, and I could obviously listen to anyone else's point of view, is we're trying to make this the connection to downtown and walkable, and have the buildings, no parking in front. So if you put a 50-foot setback and you don't allow parking in front, it's really getting...
It's remote.
I think we actually want the buildings a little bit closer.
Well, Jim, what I'm seeing here for setbacks on the second page is varied setbacks from 5 feet to 15
Okay.
feet. To
No,
allow,
I guess I'm just looking at this, your little note sheet, your cheat sheet here. I just want
Oh.
to make sure that didn't get incorporated. I know why we have a 50-foot setback for multifamily in other areas, because we're trying to separate them from other zones.
right, we would have to, this is currently in the zoning book, because one of the things we'd have to do when we get to the point of actually agreeing on what we want to go forward with is comb through the rest of the zoning book and take things out like this that contradict it. Because they're sort of tucked in here and there throughout the book.
Okay?
So that would be one of them right there.
But we're still, your thought process is still no parking in the front yard, is that correct?
Right. Parking side, well, Davis Strait Reset Plan, side and rear.
Side and rear?
Side and rear, and try to get the buildings varied, not all the same.
Okay,
But
fine. I'm all
up
set.
close, walkable, but sidewalk
All
room.
right, I made my point, you got it. You're all
Okay,
set.
but there's a question mark in there for me at least, because if this, that we took from that conversation, varied setbacks from 5 feet to 15 feet, is that enough sidewalk room? Should it be varied from 5 to 15 or 8 to 15? What's the right answer? What do
Well,
we think is a good answer?
We're gonna talk about complete streets, some of the, make sure there's room for all the things we need to put on those roads.
Well, Peter McConerty would generally like to see 4-foot sidewalks, I believe. So if the setback is only 5 feet, that's kind of squunchy.
Yep.
Tom?
Yes, Tom?
If I may, typically, the sidewalks are going to be in the road right away.
Right in the road
We're
right
talking
away.
about the town sidewalk.
I agree.
So there may be walkways to someone's doorway, but typically you're going to see that sidewalk in the road right away itself. So the buildings will be set right behind that. I think 5 foot wide is sort of a sweet spot for the DPW folks, I understand, because typically what the equipment they're using to plow a sidewalk, it's got a 5-foot blade on it. So they want 5 foot clear, and I'm not in the Peters business or anything like that, but typically you'd see something like that, and that means no utility poles and things like that in a way. So obviously you've only got so much right away to work with, so that'll come out with surveys and things to see how much you have to work with there.
Does that mean you start measuring the 5 feet, if the zoning in the end says 5 to 15 feet, that you start measuring the 5 feet at the inner edge of the sidewalk, at the part
At
that
the-
belongs
at the
to
property
the...
line.
At the property line.
At the property
Which
line.
does not include the
Does
sidewalk.
not include the sidewalk.
Yeah, got it.
So if you
So
had
if you wanna
a
plant a
5-foot
bush, you
setback,
can.
that'd be, in a 5-foot sidewalk, that'd be 10 feet from the street.
Ah, thank you, I didn't realize that. So 5 would be okay.
Pat?
Tom, I may have misspoken. That's what my understanding was, that he was trying for a 4-foot.
Well, like I
But
said,
it could be 5.
Peter and I haven't discussed it.
Yeah, I'd hate to be saying wrong, putting words in his mouth and being so.
Well, and the standard tends has moved over the years with the Americans with Disability Act. You see these vintage sidewalks that are sort of small and 3 foot wide. So as I think the ADA compliance is 4 foot clear for that requirement. But as a practice, from my compatriot in Kingston, he liked a 5-foot sidewalk because his equipment was 5 foot wide, and he didn't want to have to keep backing up and kind of going around things and stuff like that.
And I think we might actually have a slightly different standard when you turn the corner, because one of these obviously is Davis Straits, which is our busiest, the highest traffic street we have and has to
Right.
have everything. But we're talking about creating a mixed-use neighborhood, and some of the side streets may not need to have as much of a setback or anything. It might be a little bit different.
Would this allow for that?
I don't know, we just gotta talk about it. I don't know if it doesn't. I'm just thinking, that when I remember reading the Cape Cod Commission's report, it talked about primary streets and secondary streets and having
Right.
different setbacks for them.
Yep.
So we should keep that open until we refine that.
Okay, well, I don't mean to be hopelessly linear, but if we start at the top, at the definition, does the board members have any comment on that, or are you willing to live with that? Are there other kinds of residential housing, multifamily, that we should include? Because part of what this is doing is excluding single-family and two-family houses. It's saying it's going to be multifamily. Pam?
So how do you address, if someone were to convert an older house and they wanted to make it an affordable dwelling, not a conversion to an affordable unit within the dwelling, somebody passes away, it's left to their kids, they don't want it, and some good-intentioned human buys it and wants to convert it to make affordable units, be it a common living room, common kitchen, and bedrooms, not like a boarding house, but affordable living. And I know other communities have done that. So would you create a conversion bylaw to allow that single-family older home with maybe 5 bedrooms to be converted to a affordable housing unit, or would that then become a multiple family?
You gotta define what you mean by affordable housing unit, because I'm having trouble understanding exactly is that
It could be
communal living? Because we don't have
Not
that.
boarding houses, we don't have those.
I know, we don't have it. So what do you mean?
So, there are various levels of affordable housing, whether it's through the state, through all the state entities that a developer would have to go through to have affordable units, or because of their size, again, it limits the amount of money. I'm not talking about an affordable unit that would be affordable in perpetuity, like we're hoping to develop. This is something we could as I was driving in and out of some of the streets, there are some older homes there that, I can't remember what streets because I wasn't looking. But were that to happen, how could we utilize that dwelling for, yes, ma'am? Jim?
Yeah, I'm kind of lost.
Two comments, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead. This is a discussion. We're trying to figure
One
this
is, this would apply to new construction and changing construction, anything that would be changing within the Davis State's reset plan. But if there's an existing house there, that's a pre-existing condition. And any plans they have for change would come here and would be dealt with.
out. Not even here. Pre-existing non-conforming uses goes to the ZBA.
So,
So
not
it
our
doesn't
problem.
not even our problem.
Right, and I think before, I'm not sure that that's really responsive, but it would be a pre-existing situation. But for our purposes tonight, if rather than if we could deal with exceptions to it sort of later and see what we want the rule to be, then think about exceptions. It might be easier.
Okay.
I think, Pam, what you're asking doesn't exist in our bylaw. I don't know if it doesn't exist, because we don't have any places where communal living is, where there's a shared kitchen and anything we don't have that.
That's not to say we couldn't have that.
No, but it's a totally different subject, is what I'm saying. Would you like that to be something we could do all over town, or you think that's something we need to do specifically for Davis Straits?
I think we need a little bit more discussion at the Affordable Housing Committee for that. But it was something that I just wanted to
Okay,
put out there. I think I did, and
I got you with your, John, you get your,
So I have 3 questions. The first is, I don't see any mention here of form-based that we had talked about earlier. I don't know if it was going to be part of the discussion later on, or if, because it's 5 to 15 feet from the property line, it becomes form-based. I noticed there's no flat roofs in here, which part of form-based is to have flat roofs, and not all the time, but in some situations. So that's one of my questions. Another question is, policy number 3, Falmouth will accept responsibility for providing housing for all people, for people of all stages of life. I'm not sure what that means, that the whole town's gonna be responsible, or it's just a good idea that this happens in the town?
That's out of our local comprehensive plan, that's one of our goals.
Okay.
So they're just restating a goal that's already in the local.
So Falmouth will be
comprehensive
responsible,
Yeah.
okay. And then the last
plan.
one.
Housing for everybody is the idea.
And then the last one here, density, and it says residential mixed use by special permit. Would that be from the planning board special permit or from the zoning board? What are your thoughts on that?
Are you asking
Well,
those of us who
All of
did the
us.
draft? Ah,
All of
It's
it.
open discussion for all of us.
good, thank you.
I think it's undecided who's the
Okay.
special permit granting authority. I think we gotta wait till we see what we actually come up with.
Well, the suggestion here is that we keep it with the planning board like we have with some of the newer things like the turbines and to see how it works.
That's a good idea, because the zoning board has different ideas and they change things.
Well, they do, and then we can see, if we're going to put in new zoning, then we can see how it works, if it needs tweaking, if we're gonna do an overlay district, however we're going to do it. We actually get first crack at seeing how it's working and what the complaints might be.
I also want to be careful about no flat roofs, because I can almost envision a roof deck in a neighborhood where people that are on the second floor don't have any outside space to use, but they could actually go up to their roof and have be outside a little bit. So keep it open.
I think it is, everything's open right now. I want to just say I agree so much with Pat that if it would be, and with you probably, with the planning board, to be at least the initial administrator of it, because we do have design review and so much of this is a design thing. And John's point about where is the form-based zoning, you're absolutely right. And there's not a thing here for character really. So character and form-based zoning, they're yet to come. And they would not be forgotten, but they'd be, even if you have form-based zoning, you still need to have lot size, density, height, use, they need to be there somewhere.
That's my understanding, and not that I really know form-based zoning, but first we design the box, and then we figure out
Then they
what
do
goes
the
on
forms,
inside.
right.
We do the form first.
So that's step two.
The step 2 is your point, John.
Right.
We would have to talk about what we allow inside.
Okay.
Function follows form.
Yeah.
And
I
as
think
to
this is a
no,
really good start. I like.
Well,
what
we
you're
haven't
doing.
had a serious discussion on it yet. This is our first one, where we've laid
Yeah.
anything out.
well, I'm wondering if you like the definition of what it is and where it applies. Right up at the top, residential housing, where multiple separate housing units are contained within one building or several buildings in one complex, including duplexes, quadruplexes, apartment buildings, townhouses, cluster houses, rental apartments, and condominiums, and that's meant to be inclusive of everything except single-family and two-family.
Well, you say duplex, that's a two-family, so you're just contradicting yourself.
You're right, thank you. So do we want to exclude them? Do you agree with that?
I
Is the
wouldn't
board in
start off
agreement?
excluding anything except for single-family
Family?
at first, and then just work down the road and see how it looks.
And the applicability, oh,
That's a question
sorry.
on that.
Let me ask a question,
Well,
Charles.
Oh, just go, Paul's
Oh, I'm
up
sorry.
first, then you.
I'm sorry.
What do you mean by cluster homes? Cluster houses?
There are,
In light of this particular bylaw? Because to me, cluster homes isn't necessarily multifamily. I'm just curious.
I don't even know what a cluster home is. I know what a cluster development is. And this isn't that.
Something else is.
I
I'm trying
got
to put
this
you on the
list,
spot.
no, I'm on the spot. I got this list from something the Cape Cod Commission had done and thought, well, they must know what that means. I too know what a little village is. It's a village of little houses, but maybe they mean, I hate to say this, maybe they mean something like Southport, where it's a cluster of little duplexes and triplexes, kinds of things,
On one lot.
on one lot, yeah.
It doesn't seem to fit into this bylaw.
Yeah, I think we got to keep it, this is a business zoned area, and I think that, I think we need to talk about some of the uses on the ground floor should be business.
In every building, or some buildings, or?
Most.
Most, maybe there's an exception or two. You don't want to have it be totally, there might be a pattern for it, for a pure residential building, there could be some. But I think if we do it right, and I know the Cape Cod Commission and their numbers focused on that the business property would actually be more valuable and create more tax revenue for having it be business, and the residential's on the second and third floor. So I think that's my primary look at thing. But if there's a perfect little corner where you could have a residential spot, it fits into everything else, we shouldn't exclude it. But again, if it's by special permit, then we have some kind of control.
The way the reset plan does it is they've set up a system of, I think there are 4 different types of residential areas there. There are the ones you're talking about, they're right along Davis Straits. But then on the secondary streets, they're Village A, B, C, I can't cite them all, and they had different standards for those. So that they might not have mixed use on the first floor, they might be just residential, but more densely residential than residences that we have other places.
Agreed.
So we might want, in addition to this, we might want to break this into those sections that the Cape Cod Commission created.
So we
or
could
suggested.
define a couple streets, obviously Davis Straits, and maybe 1 or 2 or 3 streets that are perpendicular, that would be the business streets, and then if there's other streets, then they could be
Right.
all residential.
Pat has just pointed out that the density section addresses that.
It says Davis Straits Commercial Area, Neighborhood Commercial Area, Village Mixed Use, and Residential Mixed Use. Those were the 4
Yeah,
groupings that they suggested.
And an idea that I had is I would actually want to see the Cape Cod Commission not build models, but on drawings and everything. They have the software now that we hope they can use, that they can actually show us some plans of what
Right.
these could look like. So properties along Davis Straits could look at this. Properties perpendicular could like this. Secondary streets would have
Like-
this kind of look. So we could actually see it, you know, on
yeah. A model would really do it best.
We're talking about spending a lot of money on models. It's easy,
Oh.
yes, to answer your question, we should do a model, but we might have to be,
Not.
We'll have to be doing
take it on paper.
drawings.
We could chip in.
Buy you 50 pounds of Play-Doh and you can have at it.
Pam,
So, I think it's either by definition, I think of townhouses and I think of a single family up and down. Not like a colonial, but an up and down townhouse usually has a garage underneath and then.
all not 1 unit vertical, not horizontal.
Exactly. Which are single family. And when I think of cluster, I've never heard of a cluster house, but I've heard of a cluster, as Jim said, a development where you have a higher density, more homes, and open space designated. I mean, that's usually what happens in a cluster development.
There's another way of doing it too, and that is that you have a community building to the center that might have a couple of bedrooms, so that the smaller, we would call them cottages, that are surrounding it as a little neighborhood might have no more than 2 bedrooms. When you have people coming to visit, there you go. They would be capable of being very much smaller, because you would have the entertainment spot in that community center that's right there as a central portion of it. There would be a playground kind of attached to that idea too.
So that I've never heard of, where you would have something in the center where if you had an overflow of guests, it would be like a guest house?
They've gotten to be really popular in retirement areas because the retired people don't really want you know, you have to add extra bedrooms, you change the zoning, so you don't have to heat them most of the year. But rather than doing that, you have little cottages surrounding a larger building that's a common area.
I know Lockstead has a manor house where there are, I think, 5 or 6 rooms to rent for anyone who's living in Lockstead who's having a wedding or something like that. But, I mean, I've never heard of anything like this. I think it's kind of an interesting
We just
idea.
approved one for Valley Mead, didn't we?
Oh, they're putting them in city blocks in Oregon is where I first read about them, and they look wonderful. They look like the little cottages over in Oak Bluffs surrounding this green area in the center with the common area.
So basically,
Gingerbread houses.
this would all be on the same site, and it would basically be a condominium with exclusive use areas and shared areas.
Yeah,
Okay, that's how it's,
Right.
but, so, one of these 20,000 square foot lots may have several of these smaller units in it, but they're all owned by the association. You know, that's what happens when you do this. You set up a condo has exclusive use areas and common areas, and that's how you do it.
so you don't have direct ownership of your own little cottage?
Yes, you do.
Oh.
No, you have the exclusive, yes, you have ownership of your own cottage, and all the open areas is shared with everybody, but some of them have exclusive use to each little unit too. So
Oh,
this
yeah.
is your little green patch, and here's a
Yeah.
common, it's done
Yeah.
through the condominium docs is how it's done. It's exactly what
Well,
you're
do you
describing.
think, as you picture and have pictured the Davis Straits area, do you think there's room within that contained space for something like this?
Maybe on the eastern side, there's some open land over there. Yes, probably there is. I'm not envisioning, the bulk of Davis Straits is really strong B2 retail.
Right,
And all I'm thinking is adding the housing on the second and third floors.
ah,
Okay, because business-wise, retail on the ground floors, I mean, we don't have that much business property in town, and we should maximize it. I think one of the things we've done in our town is we've taken most of our industrial space and made it into condominiums for residential. So we have to be real careful of having the right balance. And I think we'd go to the Cape Cod Commission for some advice on that too. What is the proper balance for the whole community between what percentage of it should be residential, I know as I recall from my studying of business redevelopment, you have to have 4,000 square foot units of business on the ground floor. And it talks about the second and third floor where it is. I mean, that was looking at, I was envisioning breaking up some of those giant stores and big boxes and make them into a lot of smaller stores.
right.
That people could actually live upstairs and work downstairs and not have to drive the car anywhere and walk to the store to get something to eat or drink and come back to the
Well,
neighborhood.
and it opens up, on the back of those stores, it opens up the land that fronts on Worcester Court,
Yeah.
there.
Oh, in Worcester Court, there's a long-range vision of taking the walk all the way down to the beach. We've talked about that in the past too, and I think the Cape Cod Commission touches on that.
They do, and that's included in the reset
Right,
area. If the
yes.
applicability of this is to be within the reset area, it will go from the edge of Gus Canty, all the way up Davis Straits itself to Stop and Shop Corner, and on the left side of that, it goes in, they envision seeing 2 or 3 parallel streets to Davis Straits
Yes.
coming in, and on the right side, going up and around to Worcester Court, and all the way back to its Spring Bars, isn't it?
Yeah,
Coming down there, and they've added on a section that goes up and it has a thought about what to do about the Walmart area that was all filled in wetlands, and the raised land as the perimeter to the Walmart area, and up on those raised areas to put in multifamily housing.
that's
That's
true.
all included.
As soon as I'm thinking only on the one little part. This other application has plenty of places to go when
Yeah.
we start expanding it, right? My vision was a little too tight. You're absolutely right.
Because if we say
You're
that,
absolutely right.
yeah, and do we want it to be just, because one of the questions in that is, they picked that stopping point at Stop and Shop Light, even though naturally, your eye would sort of include all the way up to, at a minimum, the fish store there, and maybe up to the administration building. I mean, why does it stop at the Stop and Shop traffic light?
Probably because it has to stop somewhere.
So where's the right, exactly, so where's the right place?
Well, and the plaza is the biggest piece of land there that we're looking at future redevelopment of.
Maybe that's
Oh.
phase 2.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
the way it always was intended to have a phase 2.
Yeah, this is a
Limited.
start.
So it's a feasibility
Discussion.
thing?
Yeah.
And
Do
then
this
phase.
and then that?
If, hey, if
That's the
it
discussion.
works, then we could, if 30 years from now, when the next planning board's in here, they said, these guys did a really good job, why don't we take it the further step? You might be right on with that suggestion.
Oh, because they could have made a real mess going forward.
Well, I think one thing we all have to be very cognizant of here is that this is all pretty much owned and built upon. So what we're doing is trying to create a visionary plan that hopefully would be extremely salable to those who currently own the property, that they would get an enhanced value for
Right.
doing this sort of thing. So,
And I think that's really the key point, is the Cape Cod Commission says that this adds value. That the property is more valuable under this scenario than what it is now, because you're not gonna get a property owner to vote for anything that takes away value.
Yep.
So that, adding value is important. Paul, you had a,
Yeah, I know it says Davis Straits multifamily zone. I think we have to emphasize that fact because someone might think this is going across the town. I think the intent is to piggyback on the county report, have this Davis Straits zone, apply this thing and see how it works before we go elsewhere.
right.
What happened last time, particularly with the accessory apartment, everybody got nervous because it was town-wide. And they started looking at little pockets of it. And I think we have to just emphasize the fact that this is only in Davis Straits reset area. It is, but I think that's an important element at this time of planning.
Yeah, but we also need to, sooner rather than later, apply multifamily in other areas of
That'll
town.
come.
It'll come.
That'll come. If this works, that will be the next step.
I'm in agreement.
When we three met with people downstairs, the town employees working in housing and zoning and the building inspector's office, they were in favor of including Davisville Crossroads now rather than later. So we're likely to hear that.
Davisville?
Yeah, you know where they've just done the repaving and changed the intersection?
Oh, yeah, I grew up in Davisville.
You know it
And
better than I
that's
do.
4 miles down the road, or 3 miles down the road.
Right, they wanted to tack that on. That was their thought.
Well, we're gonna have that conversation with, we're trying to get on the agenda of the East Falmouth Village Association. They don't even have a meeting scheduled yet. Okay, but we've notified them that we all want to come, not just one or two of us, that our entire planning board wants to come to the next meeting and listen to what they think. So that'd be a great time to bring
Great.
that up.
Great. Okay, so can we say that if we change, just, going back to this, can we say that if we change it to cluster development and take out duplexes, that we can stick with this definition as a draft?
I don't think you need to take it
I'm
out.
all set leaving it in. This is,
Yeah.
Oh,
we don't
okay.
have to
think you need
change.
to take it out.
This is for discussion, when we get to the drafting point, we'll have more, but I want to have, I can't wait to talk to the Cape Cod Commission about this and hear their recommendations and see some of theirs. And this will be done 2 or 3 times, and at some point, we'll start refining it and taking things out, but at this point, I'm kind of just into throwing ideas out there and see what we come
You
up
could
with.
say clustered houses, because I don't think there is such a thing as a cluster house. But I think you could say clustered
Yeah.
houses, which actually, your definition fits that terminology of the little
Okay.
cottages and a central, communal area.
You have them internal, on some of the internal roads, you could actually have little pocket parks with a cluster of townhouses.
Around it, yeah.
That are two-family. That's what Beacon Hill is.
Yes,
yeah.
Right, in the south end.
Yeah.
South End.
yeah. Well, this is the first time we've ever tried to discuss this, folks.
It is. I think we're doing well. How do you like what it has to say about uses? For people who don't have it, who might just by chance be watching, what it says is mixed-use business too. So that sort of is saying that it's an overlay, isn't it? But that's also a question. Modified to disallow single and two-family housing and add multifamily use, and then subdivided into 4 character areas. Davis Straits commercial area, the one you've been talking about, Jim, right on the road, and what are now the big box stores behind. Neighborhood commercial area, which is sort of a smaller, like corner store kind of thing on a residential street. Village mixed use, that would be sort of, if you picture the way West Falmouth Village is, that's a village mixed use. It has a little store in it, it's got some B&Bs, it's got condos, it's got single family, it's got clustered housing. So village mixed use and residential mixed use to encourage an affordable mix of residential options and commercial space and encourage pedestrian scale development.
I think it's good. I think the only thing, I think not allowing a single family is a good idea, but I believe 2 families can be done appropriately. A townhouse side-by-side 2-family could work fine, in my vision. So I don't think you have to exclude anything but single family at this point.
Okay,
It
great.
doesn't mean we don't change it later. We're not deciding this. This is a long process, and we're going to have public hearings and later what other people have to say, talk to the Cape Cod Commission, but we're trying to add some density, and single family doesn't work, adding density.
And
The
density,
math
right.
doesn't work.
Not going to help. How do you like the lot size suggested here? 5,000, a lot size of 5,000 is smaller than anything else we've got in town. It's like, what is that? Is that a quarter acre, Tom? How much is a
It's
quarter
about-
acre?
It's about 1/8 of an acre.
Yeah,
An
it's
eighth of an acre. So it's tiny.
Builder's acre's 40,000 square feet, so if you keep that in mind, half.
You get 9 of
builder's
them.
half acre's 20,000, and then you go down from there.
So out of an acre,
I
say,
think it's going to vary from section to section. I think this area is so big, some of it could have much more of a residential flavor to it, and then I think that's right, but 4,000 square, I want to hear what the Cape Cod Commission says. What's the ideal size for a small neighborhood store or something on the ground floor? I'm thinking more on the business side. As soon as we go to a pure residential, I think that's right. And so we might have one of these neighborhood sections, we might vary it from one section to the other, is what I'm trying to say.
it's trying to allow for variability, but keeping them relatively small. If it's 5,000, what that's doing, now we say, our rules now are, the most you can get is 6 units per acre, per city acre, on 40,000 square feet. Whereas this is saying, well, that's 8 right there, if it's 5,000.
Yeah, but we need to have a real serious discussion on that number.
I
Because-
sort of think, maybe it's just because of the way my mind works. I don't work micro to macro. I tend to look at the larger picture and then sort of shrink it. But I think there's so much here to look at before we get down to the size of a lot. I think the Cape Cod Commission has done this in other towns. I'd like to see, where they fall on actually the lot sizes. I do.
We're going to be going to property owners that have these 10,000 square foot buildings and 120,000 square feet of parking. They're talking about rezoning it. So I'm worried about making it too small. My idea was that creating value by having some bigger lots with lots of different units in them, it makes a great investment property. Because investors like to go and say, well, I'm gonna buy this building, it's got mixed use, it's got 15 different units in it, it's not 15 different buildings. It's 15 different units, and they're collecting rent on it, and so they invest money. So these folks will be looking at their parking lots that are not producing that much for them, and turning them into mixed-use buildings that generate a lot of cash.
And those are big investors, but you could also have small investors. You don't want to exclude them, and they might already own a house-sized lot right in this area. And they read that and go, man,
Yeah,
I can
you're
build
right.
another house
I'm
right
looking
here.
at, we're looking at it from two different directions.
So suddenly, they
Yeah.
get a stake in this also, going from what is now a single-family lot size. They could have 2, 3, who knows how many. Suddenly,
point.
they're medium-sized investors now.
Let's just shrink them down to small investors.
Well, no, I mean, that's what they started, but they get more. This is a value added for them.
Let's leave it in and keep going forward until we have more conversation with
Well,
the
because I'm
commission.
picturing townhouse size in places, more citified places that have townhouses. And the frontage is like 25 feet, and it goes back maybe 80 feet, of which 50 feet is building, and the last 30 feet, if you're lucky, a couple of parking spaces. So that's a townhouse size.
Okay,
That's pretty small.
It is, but I lived in one for a long time, and I really liked it.
That was Boston.
Yep. So it's
I live in
possible.
a
Single house.
threeplex on a 12,000 square foot lot, 3 units. It's built to our current zoning on Locust Street.
See that? You could double your investment right away.
We haven't been down to your end for a while, John. You got any?
No, I think it's a good start.
Yeah, it's just a start. Okay. Thank you, Charlotte. That was a really good start. Do we have a time scheduled for the next sit-down with the Cape Cod Commission?
Could we ask for one other thing? We didn't get any feedback tonight, but maybe I don't know if you're ready for that, from our new town planner on this start.
I'm going to go with John, it's a good start. I have to tell you, I would like to have spent a lot more time with a lot more specific items, but I've been like a butterfly or a bee. I'm not pollinating, but I'm buzzing around and trying to meet as many folks and understand as many things as I can. So one of the interesting things about this part of my tenure here is cranking out product in amongst of figuring out what the issues are. So I have to tell you that I haven't been able to really do a full-scale crunch of anything that we're working on. Just trying to take in the panorama of planning in Falmouth and all of our partners and things like that. So other than the fact that looking at what is essentially, and I'm not trying to spook the stock market, a dying industry of store retail, the uses you want to look at the site are those sort of mixed uses, whether it's an artisan who's got a lead workspace, they work downstairs, or a office sort of use, or retail sort of use. But I don't think retail is going to be your prominent uses on the first floor. But of course, as we always know, there's always those things you don't want to have necessarily. No disrespect to welders, but a welder in a live workspace because of just the industrial nature of that. So I think when you look at those mixed uses, and this gets back to form-based, this is the form, this is what we like to see. The uses that are allowed in there are a range of uses, but we're not going to dictate down to retail versus office or things like that. It's, what's your business? Is it compatible with your neighbors? And can you put those in there? So I think from the big picture, to have that flexibility, both from trying to encourage people to redevelop their property, you've got to have those cares, you've got to have that flexibility. But I think that retail is going to be a very small component of that into the future, because there's a lot of things you don't have to go to a store to buy these days. And you see malls and things like that closing on a regular basis. Big box stores that don't want to be big box stores anymore. So the market is pushing these property owners to find other uses for their property. And I think that works to our advantage when we look at trying to develop and redevelop an area.
It'd be interesting to see. I've heard about them, but all the malls in suburban Boston, some of them have been totally redeveloped into mixed uses. We might want to just take a look at what's actually out there in other places. I know I lived outside like the Natick Mall for a while. That was huge and big when I was a little kid. I don't even know if it exists anymore. I'm not sure. Paul?
In Hyannis, they're planning on redoing the area of the mall on the backside where I think where Sears is, and that whole area is going to be redone. And across the street, they're trying to redevelop that entirely new area. We're going to find out more what the county commission is doing with respect to Hyannis and what input they're having there. It might be interesting to see from an informational standpoint. But they have big plans there. We're not in that league, I don't think, except maybe a Falmouth Mall, but it'd be nice to see what they're doing there.
I think we'll be affected by some of the same forces, because in Boston, the downtown Boston, right along Washington Street and the main corners of the city, and that's where I worked, was in downtown Boston, and it was happening for the last decade and a half. It's becoming residential. It's not, it's
Downtown
retail on the
Boston, the
first
towers are
floor.
becoming all residential instead
Right.
of office towers. Tom, you had a point?
Well, I was going to say, a few years ago, the Natick Mall actually added residents to the mall.
That's what I
Redid the
heard.
mall and put some residential in it. Sluggish start, but that was the concept. A town I recently worked for is looking at tearing down their Sears store and perhaps putting a hotel on the site. Not the town, but the mall, the Kingston Collection Mall. Because they know they're not going to get a big box back. They've been hoping to put a use back in this property. Now to the point, like, we should just tear it down and put a hotel on the site, or perhaps apartments in the long run, and bring those mixed uses in. So we see on a regular basis, whether it's strip centers, when you build a new strip center, people move to the new one and the old one sort of closes. There's only so much retail space to go around. So back to that, maintaining as much flexibility as you can. These are the performance standards we'd like to see, noise, dust, whatever it happens to be. But these are the performance standards under some form-based sort of code, if you get to that, those are the things we'd like to see on the site.
They've been colonizing malls in the DC area now for a number of years. And sort of creating little villages. It's almost kind of worked backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. That's what we were talking about with the plaza.
Yeah.
Just, John has a comment.
Oh, go ahead, John.
So I would just say that what we're hearing here this evening is if we can create the opportunities over the years, businesses and the users will evolve and evolve again. But we're trying to create an opportunity here for change for the better. And the future will take care of itself.
Yeah.
I think we may also have to talk about, not now, but when we get the concept down, an enticement factor to make it happen, if we can do that.
I agree.
Tiff, I don't know.
Okay, I'd like to move on. I think we've hit this one pretty good. Thank you, Charlotte, for sponsoring that discussion. Pat, do you have anything?
We meet tomorrow.
Oh, this is
So
great
I got
timing.
nothing, but we need to cycle back to the
That's okay,
minutes.
let's just keep it.
Jim,
Yes.
before you get to general correspondence, I had suggested that we have committee reports, and we have other committees too, because we have liaisons and other reports. For example, I was late tonight because I was at a Coastal Resiliency Committee meeting where we're trying to get a grant, and it's due next week, so I had to attend that meeting, and that's important too. So I think when we have committee reports, we should also go through some of the other committees
Okay.
which you have not reported on after
You're
a
up.
long period of time. I'm
Good.
on the agenda, can I talk about it?
Yeah, you
Let's
are
co-
committee
reports.
reports.
That's, you're up. You asked for it.
For a long time, maybe 2 years ago, this board had a presentation on coastal resiliency and the need for a hydrodynamic model along the coast of Falmouth based on what was done with Mass DOT. After Hurricane Sandy in New York, Mass DOT was concerned about the highways and tunnels in Boston and hired a team to go in and look at that entire area. And they've done a pretty good model, which has now been replicated in 7 or 8 or 9 communities in town, including Situate, Somerville, and even in a limited degree, Oak Bluffs. So we talked about it, and then when Doug Brown left this board and went on to the Selectmen's Board, he was an advocate for pushing forward an application to do that work early on. Funding was issued back last November to do that study, and the committee has been working for some time now trying to get a scope of work and issue it. Because of the other program going on, the municipal program, we had public hearings, the state has decided that we're far enough along that the town could vote to get a grant from the state, even though you usually have to wait until that's finished. So the intent of the town now, as of a couple of days ago, is to leverage the money that was in November and try to get a much bigger grant. In other words, that's $80,000, and they can use a 25% match to get a grant for $320,000. Now, my concern is, what's about the delays? There have been some commitments that the state wants to move very quickly on this within a couple of weeks. So last night, the Board of Selectmen right here voted to submit that application. So that's going in next week. And if we can get a application going to be 3 elements, the vulnerability assessment, which is one we really need. The second one would be a, what are we calling it? A sediment management plan for Falmouth beaches. And the third one would be a typical beach closure plan in anticipation of maybe there'd be a breach. So the intent would be to develop a scope of work for all 3 of those submitted to the state and see if they come up with the grant by leveraging the money that's already been funded. So this is moving fairly quickly, I think. And if it doesn't go through, if it doesn't work, we can still use the money that's been authorized to do the coastal vulnerability assessment, which is what we really need to identify the critical areas. So I think that's a big element that's been going on there.
Sounds like you're making some good progress there. Well, I could give a report on the EDIC. I have finished my term on the EDIC, and I am not going back on. I've been on it for many years. I accomplished what I set out. I told them this morning in this room at 8:30 to finish it up. But there's a couple things I can report on. Phase 2 of the solar project has had a pretty serious setback. The Eversource, we're now second in line. I was pushing for the town to release us to apply for the permit for the second phase, because I knew there'd be other companies out there that wanted to do solar, and the way it works is everybody in a region has to come to the same spot to connect to the grid. So like one little substation handles everything in a 10-mile area. And there's another applicant that's ahead of us in the line, so the town's put on hold on phase 2. So that's, somebody else is gonna deal with that. I'm gonna let somebody else deal with it, but that was really, we were tied up as a town on the wind turbine issue. And all they were worried about was protecting the load that they had for the wind turbines. And they didn't want to do anything else. That was a number one, excuse me, priority. But the day I got the note from the town manager that go ahead and apply, we're already too late. Somebody else is applying.
Will a second chance come around?
Oh, it's first come, first serve. We've got to wait till they're done. The way it works is they have to totally redesign the interconnection where you plug this, you take your great big cable from your solar field, you plug it into the grid. That grid has to all be redesigned to handle all that electricity coming in the daytime and shutting off at night. So the whole thing has to be re-engineered.
Yep.
And they do them one at a time. So the
So how
town,
long might it be before there's another opportunity?
well, they haven't started on ours yet, so I don't know how to answer that.
Okay.
But anyway, so that's the update. The station project is a good success. It's financially stable. However, it's not making any money. It is covering costs. We have negotiated a lease with Peter Pan that they pay all the operating costs. But the operating costs are equal to $25 a square foot, which is greater than the market rent for the area. So we're not charging them any rent. they just pay operating costs. But it is break even for the EDIC, which is good. It's sustainable.
But it doesn't cover capital expenses.
No, there's no money for reserves or anything else, but there's all kinds of future uses they're talking about. We've got 2.5 acres that could have, I came up with an idea that, brainstorming, could have a theater on it. And it could be, because it's in the cultural district, and people could walk to all the restaurants in town. And it could have parking that could be shared for commuters. You know, nighttime it could be for the theater, and daytime it could be parking. It could really become and shopping. It could be a big part of our community. But somebody else is gonna have to handle that. I passed the ball on to someone else. I worked on it for 5 or 6 years, and that was enough for me. So they'll be dealing with that going forward. Anybody, any other committee reports? Good?
Affordable housing, we're at the same point, we're waiting, we're having a unscheduled meeting, scheduled for tomorrow, for an application for funding that we have to meet and vote for a chunk of money. And I can't say anything else until I see what happens.
Be careful the open meeting law. Unscheduled meeting, that doesn't sound good.
No. I mean, it's posted and it's
Okay,
scheduled.
okay, I was
But
just,
it was off of our normal
okay.
schedule.
Oh, and,
Jim,
yep.
on a slightly different subject, we had a conversation about site plan review and design review. And, you know, we've been critical of the design review in the past because there weren't proper documentation of it. When we go through a design review, we don't really document it in the minutes. And
What's
what we
design?
need to do is
We
do the site
co-mingle it
plan-
with this.
maybe even on the agenda, put site plan review and design review, and make a distinction when we go into it, so it's reflected in the minutes. So if someone says, was there a design review on this particular project, we can look at the minutes. Right now, there's no way of documenting that we had a design review, and that's one of our criticisms in the past. So I think it's important that we disaggregate that part of it during the meeting. It's okay, we're going to design review for 5 minutes or whatever, and continue on. But somehow we have to document it, because we haven't been doing that.
Pat, you got something to say there?
Yeah, I think we have to put together a little handbook to determine what we're looking at when we call it site plan review and design review. And I find it very difficult to disassociate site plan and design. Because think about what we just looked at with Bad Martha. We didn't like the design of the building as it was because of the materials, but that also had to do with, we were looking at the site and it didn't quite fit. And in my mind, the two become commingled. Site plan, sure, it is parking, it is lighting, it is landscaping. But look at that. That's also partially building design, landscaping that we're looking at. So they kind of commingle, and it could be, as Pam said earlier, how her brain works. It could be how my brain works too, that I find it somewhat difficult to disassociate the two.
But I think the key point, and it's already been said, but let's bring it up, we probably need to have some guidelines.
Yes.
Okay, when you're coming in, you gotta address these issues on the site plan and these issues on the design review. And that way, Paul, I think your point will be made. Charlotte?
Because, agreeing very much with you, there are discrete elements, and you can go right through them.
Right.
And do it
Yes.
in an orderly way. The, not question really to Tom, I don't know whether it's Massachusetts or universe-wide, but Massachusetts Town Planners Association runs workshops on different things, and they have handouts on all this stuff. And one of them, Tom, is the site plan review workshop that your organization, do you belong to that?
I do.
Yeah, and I wonder, do they have a design review equivalent?
It's more site plan review, essentially and these are classes that the Citizens Planning Training Collaborative does. One of their very prominent and very enthusiastic instructor is a guy named Brian Curry. does a lot of these gigs. In fact, he's doing one for the town clerk's office. He emailed me the other day and asked, could I send the presentation he used the last time? So there's a number of these things that the Citizens Planning Training Collaborative does on site plans, on variances, on special permits. There's a whole suite of the sessions that they do.
Right, I went to the one on site planning. It was really very good. It was given by a lawyer who was part of all of that organization. I think Brian apparently has specialized in managing planning boards, which is kind of an interesting specialty from our point of view.
He tells me he's had a lot of experience with that.
Yes, indeed, so many boards. But I wonder if they have a whole, it wasn't included in the site plan workshop, so I wonder if they have one on design. It just would be helpful to us now.
And one of the things, the CPTC season runs in the fall. They do various workshops around the state in the fall, and in the spring they do a conference in Worcester at Holy Cross. It's usually around St. Patrick's Day weekend. It's a great take. You get to go to 3 sessions there, and whoever makes the green beans at Holy Cross, it's worth the price of admission just for the green beans they serve at this thing, plus all the goodies you get to learn. But we can also host some of those for a fee as well. So it's conceivable that we might consider hosting some of those meetings here for our friends on the Cape to look at some of those things, either in the fall season or perhaps host an individual session if you got something particular. So that's some of the things that are available training-wise. And when you look at continuing ed as an educator or as an engineer or whatever it is, usually these classes you take are a couple $100, a couple $1,000. The entrance fee for CPTC class is $35 a head. There's not a better value on the planet for training for $35 a head, and you get a handout to take home with you with basically notes on them. So we can certainly look at something like that for.
And those class outlines are all available online right now. I'm on the mailing list, I get them, and you can get the outline for all those courses. They just published something with them all on everything they covered the last
Okay,
time.
great.
You must get the mailing list on that.
No, I don't.
Oh, you're talking about it like you do, so.
No, it's just I
What's the
saw the
website?
list of what was
I don't know,
available and
Brian
signed
must
up
have
for
put me on
some.
it. It's Citizens Planning,
Citizens Planning Training Collaborative.
yeah, you just want to get on it.
Send us all the link.
Yeah, I didn't realize I was the only one getting that.
Citizens planning,
Cooperative or collaborative?
We'll send the link out
He'll get
to
it.
the board.
great.
But getting back to this issue, though, I think we need to, I don't have a problem if we combine site plan review and design review, but we do talk about the 2 functions. And the people come before us talk about design
Well,
review. So
let's do it-
somehow we have to define.
Let's do it
what
right
we
on the
mean.
agenda, Paul. Let's do
Define it or just?
No, just, so the notes flow. You want it so the notes flow, right? So
We need
if-
to be able to document.
So
what we
if the
do.
agenda says, okay, we're gonna start off talking about,
But I heard some chatter here about one morphs
It
into
does,
the other.
it does.
And that's true. So if you want to call it site plan review / design review, I have a problem with that. But I think we need to go in and define a little bit what we mean by it, so people who come before us know what it is that we expect.
Yep. We also, I've mentioned this several times, but we really have to do it. If you go into our bylaw right now, it still says in many, many places, the design review committee and what they do, and their recommendations come to the planning board. That's been 2 years since that's been changed in the overall view. But there's a section called the Code of Falmouth, I think it's 311, if I remember correctly. And it has the requirements for site plan and special permit, and what you have to do. All the requirements are combined in one section. I believe it's 311, the Code of Falmouth, not 240. It's actually, this is moving away from zoning and into the Code of Falmouth. But it still has the design review, doing the design of the buildings and features, and passing their recommendations and minutes along to the planning board. Exactly what, it's nothing like what we do. But it's, so not only do we have to review section 240, which is our zoning bylaw, we've got to comb the Code of Falmouth, which has other references to the design review committee in it. So, because we want to make it clear that that's done at this
We
meeting.
are the designers.
And one of the things I found out, and this is along the same lines, because in that section, it talks about if there's a substantial change to the design, it has to be revisited. And in my opinion, those carport solar fields are a substantial change to a design of the building, and it kicks in like 242-16, not the actual clause, but the same language about views, vistas, and neighborhood character. And it's supposed to be revisited if substantial change on that. So I've sent a note to the building commissioner to have him weigh in on taking another look at that aspect of it. But we're having the two Bobs come with a review of our zoning pretty soon?
Yes, sir. The aforementioned Professor Curry and the two Bobs and I are scheduled to sit down on May 23rd to look at those initial drafts at a staff level. So that's our current date. We were hoping for May 9th, the week of May 9th, but it's been pushed back as they're...
Well, I would like to ask them to take out their little computers and do some searches for other areas in the Code of Falmouth where it triggers design. Because I found it in a different section, and it referred them to the Design Review Committee.
Doesn't exist.
So it doesn't exist. So it's such a the Code of Falmouth is so interlocked and we gotta look at everything to do with zoning, not just in 240, but it is referenced in section 300. I found it.
So can I ask a question? So you're going to meet with the powers that be on May 23rd, the two Bobs and Brian and you. Are you going to get something back to us after that, or is that just input to the two Bobs so they can continue their work? Or how we stand about advising us?
So the idea is that we would be reviewing those at a staff level and looking at some recommendations and setting up a future meeting with the Planning Board and the Zoning Board of Appeals in presumably June. Based on the May 23rd date, that might be pushed back a little further, but the next step would be after the staff review is bringing those two, the Planning Board and the Zoning Board of Appeals in a joint meeting to talk about what some of those changes are.
What about having the building commissioner come to that? Since he's the chief enforcement officer of the zoning, do you think he should
That'd be a very swell idea.
come? Yeah.
Can I follow up on that? Would that be reviewing a draft, or would it be a discussion on what they found, what they're trying to do, similar to what their report was maybe a year ago? They had a report a year ago, and it identified a number of different things. But are we going to get more than that this time? Or is it going to be a draft? How far along are they?
Well, these are drafts of changes that they're looking at. So it wouldn't be a report, it would be drafts of changes.
So it's more than just the outline? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Do you want to circle back?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Pat.
Okay, so I move that we take the minutes off the table. We tabled it, because they weren't here. Are you?
Yeah,
I second.
I apologize for coming late. I was at that coastal
Yeah,
resiliency
okay.
committee, and you can't do two meetings at the same time, so.
So do you have
As
any
good as I
minutes
can.
for us?
No, I don't have that's the minutes that we did not have a recording secretary, and staff is preparing that, and I've not seen the draft.
So it
Okay,
remains
we'll
tabled
leave
then.
it tabled, okay.
So,
It's fine.
And I will say to you that Melinda told me she had those done and she sent them to me.
I haven't seen them yet.
My
No,
bad.
No, not worry about it. Not a big deal. Actually, I think if you would check our history, we are far better than we ever have, and any other board in town keeping current with our minutes getting approved and posted. I've sat on other boards, and there's months and months of backlog. In this board, we're really on top of it because we have the appropriate staff.
This time, we can't blame the recording secretary.
Now we got to blame somebody else.
She wasn't there. But she's been very good at
Okay.
getting the information out.
General correspondence. we have a long letter from a David Tucker. And he has taken the fact that because he's
That's a good job.
a summer resident, he's not eligible for the accessory apartment bylaw, because we,
It's the one in Woods Hole?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
But it was intentional. When we, for those of you that weren't on the board at that time, we were getting a lot of opposition, even from some of our own board members, about changing the town. And we, in order to get this passed, we dropped back and went for the core. Okay, and that was the purpose, I think, how we got it passed is, we made it so the town meetings members who live here year-round could see themselves taking advantage of this bylaw, because they would be able to age in place in their home. And what we didn't want it to do is become an investment tool that people are coming down and buying single-family homes and converting them into accessory apartment bylaws and making them into investment properties. So it was deliberate to make it for homeowners that live in Falmouth, because we wanted to get it passed. And that was a strategy that we embarked on deliberately, not to penalize summer residents, but to get the bylaw passed.
But also, even if it were only to get the bylaw passed, it's good policy, because there's no reason why we would want to encourage greater rental markets that are seasonal. There are already too much pressure on our local housing to have so much seasonal housing, so.
His point in the letter is, though, and it's discriminatory, because if I swapped parties with my neighbor who lives here year-round, he could do it. Same exact property, so it's specific to the owner.
Exactly, for people who vote in Falmouth, and he has chosen not to. He lives somewhere else.
Right, and it's hard, but that was a deliberate move to get it passed. And that was, it's hard to get something 2/3 town meeting vote. You have to have a strategy.
Well, with every bylaw, there's certain restrictions for everything, and right there in paragraph 2, it says, along with having too many bedrooms. So he didn't conform to the number of bedrooms anyways. And if he had read the bylaw previous to this, he wouldn't have been eligible.
He wasn't eligible anyway.
Anyways.
Right.
And if you look at the nature of zoning, zoning is discriminatory. Just because I live in a different section of town, I'm discriminated against because I can't put a gas station on my lot, where somebody else can. I mean, that's the nature of zoning. If we didn't have that, there'd be no sense in having zoning. So I just don't buy this.
Well, I understand his point of view, but I wanted to just make a point for the people that that talking about this. It was a deliberate act that we did to get it passed. We focused on the 240 town meeting members and how are we going to get passed. We had a member of our own board that was really against this, and it was hard. And he really carved into it a little bit because we had to satisfy him. And when we did, that's how we got it passed. Because so it wasn't easy.
So you're going to respond to this email?
No,
No.
I just did. If he doesn't follow us on FCTV, he's not going to find out.
Which is discriminatory, but that's the way it works.
It wasn't tried to be discriminatory. It's done to pass the bylaw because it was focused on, the reason why I think the bylaw passed is because we showed people ways they could stay in their home for a long period of time. That's how people saw, well, geez, I could create an accessory apartment bylaw, collect rent on it in my 50s and 60s, and in my 70s and 80s, I could move into the apartment and have someone else in the house. What a great idea. And that's what it was all about. And we were looking at town meeting members. Yes.
And obviously, I wasn't here for the intent in the earlier discussions, but we talk about the accessory housing bylaw as being owner-occupied.
Yeah.
The owner has to occupy the main structure or the accessory unit. At some point, you have to operationalize what you mean by owner-occupied. Are you owner-occupied for a few months, or are you owner-occupied for a majority of the year? And in looking at that, I was under the impression that would be more along the lines of trying to operationalize what you mean by owner-occupied.
Well, I know the intent was not to create investment opportunities for people buying multiple houses and having accessory apartments and all, but they had to live there. And I guess you can't really have two homes that you count as your, all the person has to do is declare this as his occupancy. He can be in Florida, but he can make this his home and it solves the problem.
Should you then use the term primary residence rather than owner occupied?
I'll leave that up to Pat's
Well,
group
that
to
was
sort
brought out.
out.
because
That's
there's a
another,
legal
that's another issue.
Yeah.
But there, to the point too, is that I know there are a number of people on my street, they wouldn't even begin to rent their house. But they only come down, say, various weekends during the winter and maybe for a month or maybe a few weeks during the summer. But they're not gonna rent their house. So, and we had discussed that. What if they wanted to put in an accessory apartment? They're not renting the main house, but they might want to have somebody be living there, like a child, maybe. Do we want to prohibit that? And the discussion on this board is, yeah, we did. We actually wanted occupancy for 7 months of the year for them to do it. Now, the letter writer does point this out, that this can be a difficulty in selling the house, or if somebody passes away and their children who live nowhere around here inherits the house, what do you do? Now you're gonna have a derelict house, you've gotta put it on the market, or somebody is living in the accessory apartment and, uh-oh, they're kicked out for the house.
Well, not kicked out right away. A year goes by and they don't have the affidavit, they lose the permit.
Yeah. But those were permutations that we did not
Right.
discuss.
But that's a great selling point for a house as well, for many
Yeah.
people
Absolutely
who want to
it
move
is.
here and have a rental unit.
Absolutely
So,
it is.
I mean, it does two things. It provides housing, and, you know, I don't think, honestly, that, I think the bylaw is a good bylaw, and I like the
But-
idea of primary residence.
You know, Falmouth's always had some rules. My parents were, I was a summer person, and my parents moved all over the place. And when I was 18, I didn't live with, you know, my address wasn't in my parents' house when we were in college. I woke up, I found out, hey, if you want to get a beach sticker, all you have to be is a registered voter in Falmouth. I registered to vote in Falmouth when I was 18 years old, but that was the end of the problem. Even though I worked in Boston and did everything, I made Falmouth my home. So all those issues go away. So if they work hard at it, they can find a solution.
And there's no requirement that every zoning rule has to be for everybody.
Right.
This is Bob's point. The zoning rules set up certain circumstances, and you may be at a borderline of one and wonder, oh, if only I could squeeze over. Well, no, you can't.
And we're trying to deal with a situation that not every town deals with. You're not dealing with this type of situation in Burlington.
Right.
I mean, this is a vacation destination, it's a retirement destination, and yet we need places for people to work, who work here to live. It's very different. So we need to, this bylaw was necessary, I think, to try and keep our workforce here and people that are year-round. I went through the gamut of winter, summer, and I'd like to know if this person rents their house out for a discount in the winter, which a lot of us would do. We'd rent a place cheap in the winter so we could pay the big rents in the summer. You know, so it's a different animal here, and I thought that this bylaw was a way to try and address that and to allow people to live out their life here in a smaller unit if they chose to have an accessory unit and move into that. I thought it was a good solution for the type of situation that we face here in Falmouth.
Final point, it was a strategic move to get the bylaw passed. It was done intentionally, it wasn't a mistake.
Right.
It was focusing on the 240 people that vote.
Now I think we've sufficiently replied
Yes.
Well,
to his reasoning.
I just have one other point, if I may. And funny that Bob mentioned Burlington, because when this came in, I was asked about it, and I went back and looked at some of the research that we have in the office from a survey that the Pioneer Institute did of accessory housing bylaws around the Commonwealth. The 4 that I came across, and this is from 2004, there were 4 other towns in Massachusetts that had a residency requirement so many months out of the year for accessory housing units. You know, one of them was Burlington. And I pointed out that I don't think that's really a seasonal community. There was 4 of them
Right.
sort of in the same area.
Right.
And there's a difference in a seasonal community, I think, and I love Burlington because they had one of the first Chick-fil-A's here in Massachusetts.
I mean, our value is the vacation resort type of thing. Burlington is more of commutability to Boston and access.
Future agenda items, Bob has mentioned next meeting for the conceptual meeting regarding the senior center? Is that going to be coming up?
Yes, May 27th, we've got a couple things going on. We're talking about an early start date for our next meeting on May 22nd for a joint meeting with the Historic Commission.
Yeah, it's 5:30.
And then our conversations with the Senior Center Committee. We wanted to have a discussion with them on their conceptual plan prior to filing the site plan to get some feedback from the board on that. So those are the things that we're looking at.
What are the goals of the joint meeting with the Historical Commission?
Can I turn the mic over to Corey?
It's essentially the Cape Cod Commission is giving their presentation on the Woods Hole Historic District Study. It's in some of the recommendations, so we'll most likely include some actions that you may move forward with in the near future.
And what's the date of that meeting?
May 22nd,
Starting
22nd.
at 5:30.
5:30.
I think the biggest one actually came out of the local comprehensive plan, and I remember bringing it up. They want to change the district so if a parcel's in a district, the whole parcel's in the district,
Yeah.
and not just the 100 feet or 50 feet or whatever. I'm not sure a lot of property owners are going to like that. You know, this town is tough, but I recommended it as something for discussion, because if you're really trying to preserve the character, you can't have what we have. I mean, I lived on Shore Street for a long time, and the biggest example there is they had a 100-foot setback, and some of the lots are 200 feet deep, and one couple just decided they didn't want to deal with the historic. They set the house back at the end of the lot, totally changed the pattern of the neighborhood, because, you know, you have the rhythm, the houses and the sizes, and they're all close to the street, and all of a sudden one's way, way back. And it just looked so out of place, and it was a dumb outcome. Although if I could avoid a historic restriction of my property, I would try to not have it. I don't like people telling me what to
I
do.
wouldn't have bought in the historic district.
Yeah, I wouldn't have bought a historic district, I have to, but anyways, so that'll be probably a big part of that conversation. Because it's far reaching, if you own a big piece of land, say you own 5 acres.
Wow, now it's all of it, and it's historically
And
empty meadow.
the historic strip, but now they want to apply it to places you can't see from the public way. You know, that's big.
We will see how big on the 22nd.
Yeah. So anyways, it'll be an interesting conversation, and will be conversation amongst 2 boards, and when it's really got interesting is when they take it to town meeting. Because when the property owners weigh in, it's gonna be a whole different vision of just, you know, I think, I always like to see people making historic rules actually living in historic building, historic districts, so they know what it's like. I don't really like it when somebody that doesn't even live in one tells you how you should run your own property. That's my own personal comments.
Well, that was like when the priest would tell my mother how to raise kids.
When he walks in my shoes,
Yeah.
it's my mother's comment too.
Oh, boy.
Still, they're doing a good job.
Yeah, it's gonna be an
Community.
interesting discussion.
Right.
It's gonna be an
We're
interesting
lucky to
discussion.
have it.
So that's at 5:30 on the 22nd, is that correct?
So would you ask Melinda that day to send an email reminder out that we're starting at 5:30 instead of 6:30? Because we'll show up on time.
We'll send one the day before as well.
Yeah,
Jim,
because that's a big change in my pattern.
Yeah.
maybe we should especially thank Tom and Melinda for posting the plans on the website. That's
Yes.
really a big step forward. Thank you.
Yes, we should.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.